It's always...
Oh,
Hi, and welcome to the Failing Upward Club. This is a space to reflect on the tough lessons from failure, working out how to improve and not repeat the same mistakes again as we move forward. I'm Danny Tyrrell. I'm here with my co-host Mike Bridgman. We're two of the previous founders of a company called Data Co, which had an almighty failure at the end of 2025 for a variety of different reasons. And we've spent a lot of the Failing Upward Club reflecting on some of our own lessons from that journey. But part of where we wanted to also take the Failing Upward Club was to bring in other people, share their stories, hear what they've done in the past, where their lessons are. And one of the gentlemen we thought would be a great way to start off the external guest for this show was Gary Williams. Now, Gaz is a self-described tech challenger and brand builder who spent his career at the intersection of tech, culture, and human connection. He's currently the founder of Group, where he looks to help scale challenger brands with strategic content, curated experience, and really connection to the wider funding landscape. Previously, Gaz worked as the Director of Engagement at Tractor Ventures, funding revenue-generating tech companies across Oz and New Zealand, and he served as a creative producer at the Uni of Melbourne's Innovation Hub. Now, more importantly, through all of those experience, Gaz also helped to lead the Fuck Up Nights, a famous kind of global phenomenon which has kind of swung through. Many years ago in 2016 is when he helped to kick that off in Melbourne and Sydney, which really brought entrepreneurs, innovators, business leaders along to share their biggest failures in front of hundreds of attendees. And over those years, he shared the space for many, many people to come and tell their stories. So we thought, who better to start off our external guest when it comes to fucking up than Gaz, mate. Welcome to the show. I'm not saying you fuck up everything else, Gaz, but welcome to the show, mate.
at the recording of this pod, Danny, we're about 4 weeks out from the AFL season. So, if you wanted to start off by talking about Carlton's chances this year, failure will be on the agenda. You know what I mean? But I appreciate you having me a little meta, right? Like to talk with someone who's sort of curated, sort of a storytelling experience that was themed around failure. So I can probably relate both on a couple of personal experiences, but also some interesting observations of both the stories that I helped curate, but also how the people sort of responded to that and how it was at the time that it sort of landed and why it sort of, captured the people's attention, so to speak. And what I think good looks like now.
I love it. Yeah, Carlton fan through and through, is a lot of failure at heart.
Yeah,
You don't
this
need to
year
go into any
and
kind
the
of
previous, this year and the
pre.
previous
Yeah,
three. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Hopefully, we don't have to bring up any lewd photos for today's conversation. Um,
I think Gaz is just waiting for the upward part of the failure for Carlton.
Yeah.
That's the part, right?
Yeah. No, I appreciate you having me. Thank you. There'll be a couple of not rough moments, but no doubt I'll talk pretty candidly and openly about the experiences that I experienced as curating that activation. Some observations, what I've learned, how it's impacted me, etc. So happy to talk openly of any question you fire at me, Danny and Mike.
no, awesome, mate. Well, I think we always love a good, honest kind of reflection, and yeah, really excited to see where this conversation goes. But the way we've been starting off these conversations when it's just been Mike and I and some of the content we've been reflecting ourselves is really starting at the top. Like, what are the major lessons, and then unwinding the conversation from that point and just seeing where we go. So we've got a bit of a general framing which we thought would be good to just put in front of you, and you can kind of reflect in your own way and give us the highlights, and then we'll follow on from there. But the question is really along the lines of, if you were going to reflect on all of the learnings from things that haven't gone right in your career and what you've heard from hundreds of people who share these stories through the fuck up nights, like, what are the three most important lessons or takeaways that you'd want to share with the external world? Like, where would you start if you had to summarize it to your top three?
Ooh, that's a good starting point. I thought a little bit about it before because you'd thrown me some general things to think about in advance, so that was good framing. To bucket up into three, I would definitely say that a large amount of the best experiences I've had with my career, which has danced around a little bit, but not because I've become distracted or bored, more that just things have evolved in time, such as how technology has, exploded at a rate of knots in different applications, and how I found myself at the funding cycle when other nascent streams of funding is starting to take off. So, sometimes I'm sort of good at reading the tea leaves on sort of what's emerging. So definitely that ties into the aspect of, no doubt when I've sort of lent into a bit of comfort and not into, taking on some risk, I found myself in just like not really feeling like that was a good decision. So one particular scenario there, I really wanted to get involved in sort of a university context, in terms of getting more involved from a deep tech perspective, certainly like cutting or bleeding edge type science-based technology. And I definitely had some incredible experiences there in terms of being involved with a group called Science Gallery at University of Melbourne. But also I can, openly share it wasn't an overwhelmingly positive experience for me to work in a university at large. And, from a career aspirations perspective, I felt I took a step back. And that was, I had really gone hard on sort of building reputation fast and, and seeking to achieve. And so, that sent me into a bit of a self-reflective mode of disappointment for sure. So within that story, just not embracing like some of the more riskier pursuits I've had in recent times, which includes starting up fuck up nights. I mean, it had fuck in the title, for fuck's sake, like, it was definitely quite bold for something that predominantly catered for what felt like a startup and tech audience to start, and then sort of started to broaden. So that's probably one that I've recognized for myself. Two would be, certainly in my personal perspective, attaching yourself too much to one particular side of the fence in any ways. And by that I mean trying to be all venture capital or trying to be all founder. I think it's a healthy balance to sort of know all of them. And if you attach yourself too much to either, I don't think you get a good balanced perspective. So that's probably why I've endeavored to move around a little bit, because I just feel I'm not going to have the full picture or understand contextually. Thirdly, this is maybe more of an observation of others, but definitely something that I've been guilty of and done myself. And this is more related to some of the pointers, and it just stuck straight to the top of my head. I feel that aspect of when you're an employee, in particular an early employee of a technology company or a nascently building company, etc., and you attach your identity to that company and become a voice, a spokesperson, an evangelist, whatever you call it, and you chest beat about that. I mean, I'm in the startup and tech industry. It's ruthless. You'll be made redundant in the blink of an eye. And so for your own aspirations or even your own sort of mental health to, attach yourself so fervently to something that is not your company or that you don't have equity in, I feel is just weird, and probably a good learning for myself, having done that previously. So any new additions to Canva that own, 0.00001%, you're not going to see the return that all these sort of earlier people go on. So I think, some aspects of like, just think about whether you are truly connected to this company and hold your destiny in your fortunes is worth exploring.
Guys, I reckon that's a super interesting one, because when you first kind of started talking about that, I probably thought you might have been going a different direction, that I would have interpreted was a bit more positive for you in the way you kind of really got out there and built but from my perspective, a bigger brand for yourself, but also Tractor as a business. But I don't think that's kind of what you were necessarily referring to there at all. But
No.
Interestingly, I think Danny and I have kind of gone through the rough experience of kind of definitely putting ourselves out there as the founders of Dataco and really attaching our own personal brands to that. And I think for me, and I like the distinction there, if it's your business or if you've got genuine equity in it, that's a very different thing than if you are a new employee who's kind of jumping on the personal brand bandwagon. And to do that, attaching yourself to this company. I just, as you were saying that, the one that's jumped out at me that I've seen just rinsing LinkedIn, and I think this is a broad strategy the business is employing at the moment, but the guys at Airwallex, like every single new starter in their global business, ends up for like 2 or 3 weeks just pumping their own socials about this new business they've joined and the great work they're doing. And I'm like, it's clearly a strategy, and I suspect the staff are being incentivized and motivated to do it internally. But I think it's a great call out, mate, because yeah, as we know, that, like, especially when startups tip over into almost those big scale ups and corporates, the dynamics can change pretty quickly and you can be out of a job before you know it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, like, I don't feel particularly motivated if I'm joining Commonwealth Bank to, scream from the rafters about how there's some utopian level of innovation happening from the walls within. Just go in and do your job. I think, from Attractive Ventures perspective, yeah, definitely not referring to that company, although I definitely did do that, so put the hands on it as a first employee, and sought to scale and grow that brand in some new and novel ways for the funding landscape. It's debt funding. It's relatively nascent within Australia and New Zealand, but it had been in operation, in use throughout the US and Europe for decades. I think the stat was, in 2019, something like, 17.5% of all venture deals had debt alongside equity for startup and scale up investments. So that basically says that it's a balanced option in funding within that environment, whereas we're just slow to respond here in Australia. So I had to make sure that someone was really screaming from the rooftops of Tractor being on the market and becoming somewhat ubiquitous in that funding landscape. And yeah, we deployed about $100 million into about 250 companies by the time I left. I was happy to own that. I'm a content and marketing, pig, you'd almost call it. Like, I know how to sort of like keep going and really like drive that with consistency. Whereas the founders are not as maybe content minded, and that's going to be a bit of a barrier to see them do that. So yeah, no doubt. I see a lot of people own that evangelist thing with various companies. I'm not cynical of it, etc. I would just implore to the younger groups coming through that are jazzed on the companies to also be self-aware enough to understand when you're the commodity in this conversation.
Yeah, I think it's a good lesson in both directions as well, Gaz, right? Because I think I completely agree in terms of if you're the employee and you don't really have that full buy-in to that, at the end of the day, everything's business. I remember going through that same experience in a consulting aspect, and the experience at the time was more like it was not being made redundant. It was actually being looked over for promotion, and the reason for the look over was literally the business didn't perform well enough. And even though I had individually a smashing year and like crushed all the performance and got rated incredibly highly, like if there was a promotion spot to go, it was probably going to me, but the business didn't do well enough. And I remember so vividly having that conversation with an MD at the time and then being like, you're taking this pretty well. And in my mind, I was like, and this is what I said to her, I was like, that's a business decision. That's okay. Like, there's nothing I can change a business decision. And at the end of the day, the business decision might be you have to move on as an individual. As long as I realize it, at the end of the day, it's not about, I can always say, oh, the company loves me. But in the tough times, people love you, not the company. The company doesn't love you. The company will ultimately do the thing to push you away if you need to be pushed away. And individuals should treat their own careers like that business transaction. And if you're not getting the right buy-in, then maybe you've got to look about other opportunities to go there. But the reason I said it's a double meaning is because if you are the founder or if you are the executive, you need to know that if you really want to get true buy-in and get people on the journey, if you're not giving them that equity and you're not just the 0.00001 tiny little ESOP for a massive company, but it's like you're giving them a good chunk and you're giving them the right kind of level of incentive, then you absolutely have a risk that person's just going to leave because they don't really have the skin in the game. So I think it's a good lesson in both directions for people to think about.
Yeah, and exactly. We're talking about aspects of like I don't know, like promoting the company, like LinkedIn posts, etc. It's not really that interesting or sophisticated, but when it then boils down to more human elements and psychological elements of like employees feeling like they're on the ride, they're incentivized, they feel ownership, They're incentivized to understand what an exit looks like for that company, like when liquidity comes about, how that can be an element of either life changing or just very helpful at a time where life is expensive. Like all these things sort of matter, and it's really interesting for me to observe some very thoughtful leaders of companies in recent times who do think through that minutia, as opposed to other leaders who never consider it because they don't understand marketing, for example, or other aspects of, say, customer satisfaction, customer experience, great user experience on site, etc., etc. When everything's thought through without you needing to be full Rain Man about it, it's interesting, and that would feed into the majority of successful companies, I would say, that do think through the small things.
Yeah, that's
Mind you, I got plenty of other tales of, making the wrong decisions at corporate headquarters that lost a ton of money, and, losing personal money myself in shitty investments, but, wherever you want to take it.
Love it, mate. We were going to kind of pivot to another kind of framing question, but I just wanted to go
Yep.
back the first lesson you shared, because I thought, again, a great take on that one for new employees maybe entering the workforce. I think the first one's awesome as well, and it was, if I could kind of play it back to you and summarize it a little bit, it's almost a lesson around optimizing for learning, or if you will, like optimizing for kind of a degree of risk in kind of career and job moves, as opposed to sort of just seeking safety wherever you're going. And I thought that, again, really resonates with kind of my story and how I've tried to kind of frame my career over probably the latter half of what I've been through so far. But yeah, mate, if you could kind of unpack that, and I guess like, how are you thinking about that moving forward as well?
Even on like a personal level, like my wife and I will joke sometimes that certain decisions we've made, so for instance, not to bore the audience, I'll be super quick. I live in Footscray at the moment, around the west of Melbourne. Really enjoy it. It's a bit of a melting pot and fun environment. Sometimes a little unknown for the rest of Melbourne, but it works for us. It's an interesting place to live for sure. But there was definitely like a period way back when where we were going to move into around this area, or around Yarraville, which is quite well known for being a great little village. And, asked around the family and friends, etc. And everyone was like, oh, fuck, absolutely not. And, like, they're just little, micro points along the way. For me, I was working in sort of corporate world with, the Good Guys head office for a number of years. And yeah, just didn't really feel like I was elevating my career. And, I'm ambitious and had some setbacks earlier in my life. So I wanted to move towards those ambitions with speed. And I just decided that I wanted to get into the tech industry. I feel like I can make a name for myself by doing some really good work there that was a little novel, and that novelty feeding into, I was playing in bands and had a lot of creative outlets in creative writing and production, etc. in previous times. And I thought that might be an interesting spot for me to move into, because I feel like I can do some good work, but I don't know what that work is just yet. And so, yeah, made that jump eventually after being turned down multiple times, as every, good job seeker is. But, I, for instance, just to round this out, the education piece is important because I landed at a group called General Assembly to begin my career leading their partnerships in Australia. And the way I got that job was both the application, etc., but I just kept turning up to the campus where they were teaching courses. And in particular, the director of the Melbourne campus, he was teaching lunchtime classes, etc. And I just kept rocking up for multiple weeks and just kept saying I want the job. Because I knew on face value with the resume that he wouldn't give me the job because I'm from the Good Guys. It's not that exciting compared to this New York-based global tech school offering that, basically disrupts the university environment at large. And they saw the tenacity, and I made the right bet there. Landed in there, and after a little bit of fumbling around, caught the wind in my sails, so to speak. And from there, have just made various decisions based on I feel this is where things are moving. And so to round that out, that would be everything from moving to the university, because I could see deep tech really becoming something of value, particularly relating to Australia's capacity to produce fantastic research commercialization. And so that was one particular aspect of why I really wanted to lean into that at that point in time. Another being the funding cycle. Bootstrap companies were really doing phenomenally well in my mind for what I liked the best. And I'll give you one good example. That would be Envato, which is a Melbourne-born bootstrap success company, and that was my favorite tech company. So that there's like some things that sat in the subconscious mixed with reading the tea leaves, so to speak.
Yeah, nice. It's like one of the framing questions we were going to dive into, Gaz, was to do with like the qualities that you think you really appreciate or you have because things didn't go to plan. But even listening to you speak there, it nearly sounds like some of the qualities that you have around seeking the next thing and being proactive you've nearly created those qualities in yourself by knowing you're going to encounter failure. Like you weren't afraid to go and say, these guys might say no to me, but I'm fine to just go rock up to the campus and be there. And you know that maybe the first 3 times they're going to say, nah, sorry, we're not interested. But by putting yourself out there and having that proactive mindset, you've nearly created those qualities in yourself, right? Like, is that how you see what your personality is there because you have tried to carve yourself towards that? Or do you think this has been shaped because it was nearly triggered or forced?
Left money on the table plenty of times to pursue what I think would eventually become the better play here. So always with a bit of a vision of a 7 to 10 year horizon, with that 7-year being of particular interest being that I would sort of always see an angel investment being a sort of a 7-year path to liquidity, basically. So whilst I don't think of everything in purely fiduciary terms, no doubt I do think about, well, if I move in this direction, that would open up this interesting pathway and we might be able to sort of build something there from there. So, for example, I am very likely to return to building a school model this year, but my bet or my risk is that actually I'm going to do exactly what I was involved with at General Assembly and build in person. But if I do it with the branding and the partnerships and what I know works, especially from an outcomes perspective with talent, if I do that well, that will perform really well, except that I don't need venture capital funding for that. I'll just grow it with revenue. The extension of that, if I was to prophesize of what the tea leaves are, is that as it expands in scale, it can also incorporate aspects such as building products internally, building things that this new form of technology wasn't available back then. And that's exciting to me, to see that there's a mix of venture and education sitting alongside each other. And that's just my bet. But, there'll be some elements of bombing out and some parts of it will be right, I would prophesize.
Venturecation, Gaz. You've heard it here first.
Venturecation. Hey, I'm the brand guy, okay? Don't. You're the still product founder. Don't get in my lane.
That is good. That is Mike's one for the week. We always used to joke at Dataco. Mike has this one perler idea that he comes up with every single week. Most likely on like Friday afternoons is his sweet spot time.
Yeah.
And we're recording this early arvo on a Friday, Mike, and you have delivered.
2 coffees, I'm flying.
A little bit of Jamison in one of them. It started to.
That's right. The old Irish coffee.
I hope that answers the question. I don't want to waffle on too much. I just want to acknowledge the benefits of running the fuck up nights experience and the partnerships in particular at the General Assembly, and then the probably the role at Tractor Ventures where I met honestly thousands of founders, plus all the venture capitalists, plus all the builders and operators that I get particularly inspired by. No doubt that's going to shape your thinking in terms of not only the venture you're seeking to build, but your worldview. I've definitely been influenced by some amazing people, which has seen me, definitely challenge my thinking over the time as well.
Yeah, nice. Maybe let's just touch a little bit more on the fuck up nights, Gaz, because I know we've referenced it a couple of times, And like the concept is very similar to some of what we're doing here. And to be perfectly honest, some of the inspiration for even setting up the Failing Upward Club post the Dataco explosion was from the knowledge of doing work with you over the years and knowing that you'd done some of the stuff with the fuck up nights. But the concept is really around letting people stand up on stage and talk through their experiences. Love to hear a little bit more about like what was it like in the early days of where it went through. Like, why do you think it got such a pickup in terms of popularity? And I know that you guys don't run it and aren't involved anymore. Like maybe like where did it end up going as well would be great for you to just to dive into a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, look, it was magical. Like it was both like, you know, capturing the attention with it being sort of around the start of when I entered the tech industry in particular. You know, like it felt good, it felt right, it felt like some elements of bottle magic, capture the zeitgeist, whatever you want to call it. I think it's important to know. And I'll definitely say from the outset, just in case we don't get to it, and then I didn't like some aspects of it later, and that definitely influenced mine and Josh Lipscomb, who I ran it with, a decision to just put it to bed, and you know, rather than let it flame out, just you know, depart gracefully, if you will. But yeah, just so people get the context of what I'm talking about, it was a storytelling event, started in Mexico many a year ago, 10 to 12 years ago. Started in small, humble beginnings. Some travelers sort of came across an event that would pop up every now and again, and people would share, you know, stories of how they failed in usually business, but maybe other pursuits in life. And then those people were like, oh, this would be great to set up in this, you know, this town where I live, etc. And all of a sudden chapters were built. And so, yeah, like it was a little element of fate with Josh in particular, who I did it with. You know, the aspect of being co-curators of a thing where you get into that you're curating guests and where this is going to be and when. Yeah, it was a phenomenal experience. Like Josh and I are barely alike. Like very, very good friends. Never once had a disagreement in it. Just same brain thinking, but two different angles and respectful of each other's approach. But to give context on when this was running as a storytelling event, this would have been around 2016, mid 2016. Dancing forward a bit, but I'll bring it back, is that as we ran them a little more and it started to become quite notorious, the stories started getting deeper. People started feeling comfortable with the concept. So they started feeling comfortable opening up. And what opening up meant was starting to talk about mental health, their personal experiences with having some, you know, really terrible experiences with failure. And so that obviously meant that certain conversations were tabled during the events. So we had a mixture of really lighthearted, very entertaining, loose, subculture-y, fast, you know, energy, almost akin to a comedy festival show, if you will, in some ways. And then some other parts would go to like some incredibly dark places, and that was sort of difficult for me to reconcile with sometimes as a curator. And it wasn't anything related to the speakers that they shouldn't have broached these topics. It was that you know, we were sort of curating a storytelling experience where people would share things and people in the audience would definitely feel them. So you sort of start to feel a bit of a responsibility on that you're acknowledging mental health, that you're making sure that you're including directions for people if they're seeking help to use appropriate pathways rather than, you know, contact me. Yeah. And that we made active choices also on what we were doing with this event. So one example would be that it was always free. It was always run by donations of beers from Young Henry's or eventually Heaps Normal. A venue would give us a venue, so we'd fill it. No sponsorship, no fees taken, and I definitely did not seek to make Fuck Up Nights, the event, into my own consulting company relating to failure of business. Those are the sort of like proper steps I took with it. And so, you know, when you've got events with like 400 people turning up month after month, but then you're not actively monetizing it. It becomes an interesting exercise. Ran that for 7 years in Melbourne and Sydney, and then just called it.
It's awesome. I didn't appreciate, Gaz, probably some of amongst many things, like how the content kind of grows, and then your responsibility to the kind of human sharing and how that can have an impact. And I'd imagine all the other kind of, like, baggage is probably a negative word to use for it, but just like all the other thought that had to go into it. And obviously knowing who you are as a person, the amount of care that you would have taken to kind of put the right steps in place, I can appreciate would have become very, very onerous at a point in time with 400 people and some kind of pretty serious things being shared.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, sometimes you want to, like, obviously I'm seeking to make sure that everyone has a fantastic experience. I'm picking speakers that I think are going to, represent it well because they get their outlet to talk about something. I'm taking risks I'm saying, here's a general framing, but you don't need to tell me the story. Like, you just go for it. And so, in terms of, I counted them, we would have curated minimum 150 speakers across that time. I would have, so that's 150 like briefings with people of all walks of life, leaders of massive multi-billion-dollar companies, and artists from the western suburbs. I've seen them all. Some guests that might be relevant for the audience, just to attach to Ethan Didascalou, who runs July Suitcases, for example. Had known him for years, and I thought it'd be a good time for a story. Alex Zachariah runs Linktree, Melbourne-based again. Con Francescos, who you know. And here I am, I'm rattling off 3 dudes in a row, but I assure you that the diversity, yeah, the diversity was well in effect. So I would definitely give myself a pat on the back for a job of curation done well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Hey, guys. Sorry, go, Danny.
No, you're up, mate. You got the chair, mate.
I'm gonna stay on the theme, so let me jump in quickly.
Yeah, anything.
Just really interesting, like, because you've alluded to in the opening as well, like, some perspectives on what this kind of genre of, like, speaking about failure and stuff does well, and maybe what some others don't do so well. But just, like, interested, again, kind of just topical at the moment. I've been reading a few things, like the dichotomy, or like Australia has this massive issue with, like, tall poppy syndrome and all this kind of stuff, yet you managed to curate an event that really celebrated failure. Like, is that unique to the startup world, or, like, how does that all fit together? And is it, like, I don't know, really keen for your take on it, because I'm trying to kind of wrestle with that as well, like how this all fits together.
Yeah, I'll unpack it in a couple of ways, but I'll try not to make it really rangy. Maybe just first to say that so when Josh and I agreed to take the license on for Melbourne and then eventually Sydney, but more specifically focus on Melbourne when we began, we were both working in an element of definitely tech space. Me at General Assembly in the tech school with scores of people coming through to go through courses, events and whatnot. And Josh at Inspire 9, which is right outside Richmond Station, and is essentially the home of Melbourne startups, where every entrepreneur and their dog had come through. And so, it had a definite startup focus at the start, but not exclusively. It's just that these were the people that we knew, and we knew we could curate them. But then we started to do more interesting things, such as do it alongside Melbourne International Film Festival, Melbourne Design Week, Melbourne Comedy Festival, Good Design Festival in Sydney. We ended up in some outrageous spots such as Overseas Passenger Terminal and, massive high-rises and basements and that. It became a really fun exercise of popping up everywhere. No doubt from the startup and tech perspective, it was like, in terms of the power law game and the venture capital world, etc., it's like, 99 are going to blow up out of 100, and one will shoot to the moon, etc. And we talk about unicorns, and sound like, as one of my former bosses said, we sound like children. We're talking about unicorns and fucking rainbows and etc. And yeah, it's a very aspirational and pie in the sky and self-promotional world as well. So no doubt, the failure is sort of baked in. It's sort of like understood that it's part of the game, and failure is not a good thing by any stretch of the imagination. I think, Mike, and it's not to pull you up at all, but it was sort of baked into your question before of decisions and why I sort of started to reject some of the notions as it went on. One was the aspect of like it being sort of a community. Like I get tagged as a community builder a lot, but I actually think in like quite either commercial or entertainment terms. And so Fuck Up Nights for me was like an audience building exercise. It's just like run something for the people, and do it almost like a bit of a punk rock exercise. Like, how long can we do this for without taking any money? Deliberately, just to do something different without any rules, no one telling us what to do, and bring a different conversation in that felt a bit more human, and then achieve that. So the payoff in that is that we built our own personal reputation, and that added up to things, and became really good hosts and event producers in the process. But to go to your specific question, Mike, to round it out, I have definitely noticed the meta aspect of the failure conversation, which is that as it got tabled more, people came more, they related more to it. They've seen it in practice in storytelling events. It's discussed now in podcasts. Mental health is definitely well on the agenda, so this is not a new thing anymore. But certain people have really started to take the Fuck Up Nights ethos and start to position that as, let's celebrate failure. Let's celebrate the ability to talk openly about failure, etc. And I reject that. Like, it is not, like, it's not good in any way, shape or form. It doesn't matter the learning that you've experienced as part of it. And I started to see the vibes of things where people would not have attended our event, but would view it as like a Tony Robbins style thing. And I'm like, this is just a storytelling exercise, and I'm not here to celebrate people's downfalls mentally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's probably... Yeah, if that gives you the good explainer of like some decisions I made to be like, let's end it with the version that people associate with us, then that's the reason for doing so. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a lot of nuance in, as you said, in celebrating failure, in terms of like a lot of different aspects to it, in terms of celebrating something that's gone really wrong with someone, and even sitting there to be like, yeah, it's all like, it's okay to fail. There's a lot of nuance in saying it's okay to fail, because you're not trying to set out to fail even. It's more about like the responses we have to certain events and certain things that happen to us, and like the celebrating is more the reaction rather than the failure. And I know it's just easy to say, oh, well, let's celebrate failure or what we learned, but it's more like, how do you learn so you don't fail again? Like, if anyone who's trying to fail specifically aren't really following the right path. And then, as you said, there's a whole lot of other aspects to it in terms of really what's going on from a mental health perspective and how people treat it. And it's I can appreciate it would have been a super, super fine line for you guys to try to craft over the years, and potentially at a point it just kind of loses some of that beautiful essence that you would have had in the early days, that I can appreciate you would have, why you had to walk away at a certain point in time.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, some of the speakers felt completely absolved that they were finally able to get some things off their chest, and they connected with the audience and, got some nods and some reassuring smiles. And that was an amazing experience for them. But, like some broke down on stage because, when the pressure pressure valve got released finally, it was a bit much. A few people have shared stories. I don't believe they've ever really recovered because they've left the industry and they've gone on other paths. Others just have lost interest in building ventures anymore, just based on like, I despise, my experience with venture capitalists, and I just don't really see the attraction in building something bootstrapped. I'd rather just go in-house with the company, whilst I still try to recover from that experience for the next decade or so. So I hope that's been articulated okay. Or that it's clear, like my view on it. I felt sometimes that I was tagged a little bit with a person who would promote it as celebrating failure as a overwhelmingly positive thing. Acknowledging failure in a storytelling context is the positive thing for me.
Love it.
Well, guys,
Yeah.
appreciate all the time you've.
Oh, well, I'm a regular interviewer, so I may as well flip the tables. But
Yeah, I was like, are you turning the script? Yeah.
What's going on here?
just for a couple of minutes, just to, with that in mind, like, how does that sort of, with your sort of relatively recent experiences and now sort of, taking that in and then thinking now about your most recent experiences, how's that sort of land with you?
No, I think there's a lot of really, I think part of the reason we want to try to explore having some other people on is, again, it's less around the celebrating failure. It's just like, where are those common nuggets of things that you can pick up? And I think what I found through our own kind of experience of, and again, failures are, there's certain aspects of what happened with a Dataco that we don't consider it a failure as such. Like, it wasn't like we tried to do something and it didn't work. Like, the reasons that went downhill were really fucking complex. But what I find interesting with this whole domain is just listening to other stories and be like, what are the things you'd pick up that it's only when you go through it yourself, you're like, oh, fuck, that's what Gaz was saying about this. And I think part of the reaction and the learning from what you're saying is, even if you sit there and have an event where hundreds and hundreds of people are getting up there and talking about it every single week, you're never going to be able to absorb it all. And a lot of it becomes your own journey and your own mentality. And I think your reflections of the approach you've had to, as I said, nearly expect not always going to plan is going to be part of that, and being comfortable with that approach. I think that's at the heart of really equipping yourself to take on whatever comes down the road. And I think it's more when people have these really rigid views of, this is exactly what's going to happen, and if it doesn't, I'm completely screwed. That's when they get in a funny position where they don't handle it if they do become redundant, or if they do get a company which goes down. So yeah, a few different pieces in that, but I think it's just interesting to hear that it's like, lessons of failure aren't going to save you from dealing with it. It's more having the right mentality going forward.
Yeah, maybe I'll add one more thing and then shoot over to you, Mike. I think almost our very last one that we ran in Melbourne, and we had Dom Pym, who was the founder of Upbank, alongside a great group of people. And Dom opened up emotionally because he's a great speaker, but also, we'll definitely explore the topic. But he got particularly emotional just talking about the importance of people in his team, and how there were definitely regrets along the way. So even with my experience of curating a storytelling event that reached its end, I still have this really, profound moment, sort of taking that in, hearing from a well-regarded, very successful business leader, but him to reflect and reminisce on the importance of people. And so even after that moment, I'm still, I adjusted my thinking again, just to be a little bit more appreciative of the people I'm surrounded by, and then acknowledge that, some of these moments won't last. We're working together for 3 months, 6 months, maybe. And so, that learning, gleaning off an experience shared by someone, that's the type of thing I found meaningful personally. And I know plenty of others did too.
Yeah, nice. Well, I guess, Gaz, my kind of perspective on it, and definitely where, Danny and I have tried to play in the kind of failure space, if you will, or with the content we're producing, is first and foremost to kind of own the narrative a little bit, which I think is important, and that's kind of tactical as well. But also, it's really, for me, the failure aspect of it is how you kind of learn and grow off the back of it. So it's not kind of celebrating the moment in and of itself, but it's about, hey, what have we learned through that experience? To Danny's point, it's not all bad. A large part of it is not failure, but if we're going to go and do something again, here's the kind of half a dozen things that we're really clear now through that experience that we're going to shift, and we know it's going to be better the next time. So it's really positioning it as around not letting it just kind of pass over you and become just something you experience and then just try and get on with. It's like, no, dive into it a little bit, but do it in the mindset of what are we learning from this? So turn it into like a kind of proactive approach to taking control of the event and then growing off the back of that. And for me, that's how I think it probably shifts the paradigm a little bit from just dwelling in it and celebrating the pure downfall, as opposed to like, yeah, shit happens. Now let's go and rebuild. But like, let's get in there and explore it a bit, and then let's go out the other side bigger and better.
Yeah, and I'm completely on board. I mean, I'm really enjoying the content. I think you're doing like a great thing in terms of putting that out there, etc. And just as we were sort of having that chat about, that aspect. Also, one particular aspect that I enjoyed with the Fuck Up Nights event, but also an observation that informed it in the lead up, but then has made me think about it afterwards, is also, tension and aspects of like, whether it's disagreement, etc. A big part which persists to this day is that, for all our challenger style, life-changing type thing that the startup world positions itself as. If you go to any sort of startup panel discussion, it's fundamentally just like head nodding and very polite agreement, which is ironic in in the Australian context of like, yes, tall poppy, but also like, we've got a fair bit of opinion down at the pub, around our respective footy teams, and yet, it's like politeness is the only thing invited into the room in our particular events where we're conveying our worldview or message to people in the room, and so really sought to challenge that with the events and the curation and the conversation to push something that felt a little bit more real. Achieved that, and definitely saw like a tonal shift in people becoming a bit more comfortable with that at that time. And I would love to see more of that, which is what this podcast and your writings and musings help serve for sure.
No, I appreciate the shout out, Gaz, and I think you've touched on a few different things to do with venturecation and even about curating different experiences. I know you've got a couple of things you've been musing over for this year. Is there any teasers you want to leave people with in terms of where your focus is going to be for 2026? Like, what do you see coming up? What do you want to throw out there to the world?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, what did I call it before? I'm a content pig, so I'll just keep producing some content. But I'm no longer. I'm not infatuated with the vanity metrics aligned alongside that. I'm a big advocate for curation, and so for me, it will be an aspect of written that really leans into the builders of the companies. But I do have some plays in relation to. I'll have a very short form podcast focused on a number of funding groups that don't have any marketing or brand building or even talk about what they do. And whilst I'm almost doing a little bit of a legwork for them by inviting them to talk, no doubt I've gotten to know a few of them, and I'm like, you're actually quite brilliant. And if you knew more people in these particular industries, that can only be good for that company to access new ways of funding, but I doubt they even know you at the moment. And so to give you the briefest finishing point on that, there are some exceptional people investing in cannabis, psychedelics, even sex tech. I get involved in like all these sort of subculture-y, vicey sort of industries as well, by way of curating the events, doing the interviews, written interviews, and then the companies I work with. And so I'll just keep exploring that in content form. And I believe that will translate also into where the school overlaps. So let's see if I do it well and deliver on my Friday promises.
Love it. Sounds like a good collection of industries to get together for a curated experience, Gaz. I'm definitely intrigued by that. But no, it's great to have you on. Yes.
But like if you just see what everyone prophesizes, it's it's personalization, it's connection, etc. So you're doing that with this content, and I would definitely foresee that one point you're going to have the conversation, and someone's like, "I just got to know you both so much better through that. Let's talk shop and chat."
No, it's definitely different pockets that's good for you to highlight and to bring up. I know you didn't talk about the one that I'm the most excited about, which is the Podrucker podcast. That's the other little side one that comes in here. For those who don't know, Gaz is we probably do know from all of the Carlton jokes at the start, but a diehard sports fan really, but AFL is definitely on the agenda, so I think you'd be excited for more Podrucker content this year, as well as a big NFL game in Melbourne in September.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And if I can give you one final quote, the future is newsletters, people, not LinkedIn. So yeah, what's your space? I'm going to do an AFL newsletter, and I'm going to seek to prove that that is the way.
Love it.
Well, Mike, do you want to wrap us up? I think I tried 2 or 3 times to do the wrap up there, and I just couldn't fucking do it. So I've struggled a few times. Mike, I'm just going to hand over to you, and you finish it off, mate.
Thanks, Danny. Well, Gaz, mate, thank you so much for being the inaugural guest on Failing Upward Club. We've had the pleasure of working with you over the journey, and it was awesome to sit down today and unpack some of your learnings around all your experiences in this space. So for everyone listening at home, thanks for tuning in. If you like what you've heard, please like and subscribe. Send us a note if there's any guests that you think we should interview. But otherwise, have an awesome day. And Gaz, thank you so much once again.
Thanks so much, guys. All the best. I'll be reading and listening along. Thank you.